Hey everyone, tonight we're diving deep into the quiet, silken world of ancient Chinese nobility, specifically exploring how they sought a good night's rest. We're going far beyond just fluffy silk pillows, though as we'll discover, their pillows were often anything but fluffy. Imagine trying to get comfortable on a piece of intricately carved porcelain after a long day of, well, nobling. You'd probably be longing for your memory foam mattress pretty quickly. Let's be honest. You probably wouldn't survive this level of commitment to nocturnal aesthetics. We're talking about an era where your entire bedroom, your pre sleep rituals, and even the very air you breathed were meticulously curated to invite slumber. So before you get all comfy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support really does help the channel grow and allows me to keep unearthing these sleepy little corners of history for you. And hey, if you're feeling chatty, drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where our little community of history-loving night owls is spread across the globe. Now let's dim the lights, maybe get that fan going for some gentle white noise, and begin tonight's journey together. You feel the day's duties, the intricate ballet of courtly life, or the quiet hum of managing a vast estate begin to settle like fine dust. The sun, a fiery orb, has already dipped below the ornate rooflines, painting the sky in hues of fading orange and deepening indigo. It's time to retreat from the world of appearances and obligations and step into the sanctuary of your private quarters, a space designed not just for rest, but for the careful cultivation of tranquility. You pass through a moon gate, its circular form a symbol of perfection and entry into a more serene realm. The air itself seems to shift, cooler now, and carrying the faint, almost imperceptible scent of sandalwood from a distant burner, a prelude to the olfactory landscape of your bedchamber. Your footsteps make only the softest whisper on the polished wooden floors, covered here and there with woven mats that feel cool and smooth beneath your silk-slippered feet. As you approach your bedchamber, you might pause to admire a carefully placed scroll painting on the wall of the antechamber, perhaps a landscape of misty mountains or a depiction of bamboo swaying gently in an unseen breeze. These aren't random decorations. They are chosen to evoke peace, to calm the shen, your spirit, before you even cross the threshold into the room where you will sleep. The heavy carved wooden door to your bedchamber is opened silently by an attendant who bows low, their presence unobtrusive, almost a shadow. You step inside. The first thing you notice is the profound stillness. This room is likely situated in the quietest part of your residence, shielded from the noise of the kitchens or the more public courtyards. Its very orientation has been meticulously planned according to the ancient principles of feng shui. Your sleeping palace, or chinju, faces a direction deemed auspicious, perhaps south, to welcome positive energy, or qi, and to align with the natural order of the cosmos. Historians still debate whether the precise mathematical calculations for feng shui were universally applied, or if local traditions and the intuition of the master builder played a more significant role in a noble's home. Regardless, the feeling is one of harmonious balance. The room is spacious, but not cavernously so. It's designed to feel encompassing, secure, soft, diffused light, emanates from a few strategically placed oil lamps, their flames flickering gently, casting dancing shadows on the silk-hung walls. The silk itself, perhaps a deep crimson or a tranquil blue, is embroidered with auspicious symbols, cranes for longevity, peonies for prosperity, or perhaps a mythical kiln to ward off malevolent spirits. You run a hand along one of the hangings. The silk is cool, exquisitely smooth, a testament to the incredible craftsmanship of the era. It's a far cry from your modern cotton sheets, isn't it? Though arguably just as luxurious in its own context. Imagine the sheer number of silkworms that toiled away to make your bedroom drapes. It's enough to make you feel a little guilty for complaining about laundry day. Large, lacquered screens, inlaid with mother of pearl or scenes from nature, divide the space, creating intimate alcoves and ensuring that drafts don't disturb your slumber. These screens are not just functional, they are works of art, each panel telling a story or capturing a moment of beauty. They also play a role in managing the flow of qi, preventing it from rushing too quickly through the room and disturbing your peace. You wouldn't want your qi to get a speeding ticket now, would you? In the warmer months, attendants might have placed large blocks of ice, harvested in winter and stored in deep, insulated pits in earthenware basins around the room. As the ice slowly melts, it cools the air, creating a more comfortable sleeping environment. It's a surprisingly effective, if labor-intensive, form of ancient air conditioning. Can you imagine the logistics? All right, lads, off to the ice caves, the master's feeling a bit warm. In winter, bronze or ceramic braziers, filled with slow-burning, specially prepared charcoal, would radiate a gentle warmth. This charcoal is often smokeless and sometimes even scented with herbs or fragrant woods, adding another subtle layer to the room's aroma. It's a far cry from just cranking up the thermostat, but it speaks to a deep connection with the natural elements and a resourcefulness that's quite admirable. The centerpiece of the room, of course, is your bed. And it's not just a bed, it's an elaborate structure, a room within a room, crafted from dark, polished wood like catalpa or nanmu. It might be a four-poster or even a more enclosed canopy bed, draped with layers of silk gauze or heavier brocade depending on the season. These hangings offer privacy, warmth, and protection from drafts, and dare we say, any stray mosquitoes that manage to bypass the incense. Think of it as the original luxury fort. You could probably host a small, very exclusive tea party in some of these beds. Now, about those pillows. Forget your down-filled, cloud-like modern cushions. You, as a noble of ancient China, are more likely to rest your head on a pillow made of jade, porcelain, wood, or even bronze. Yes, hard pillows. It sounds counterintuitive to our modern sensibilities, doesn't it? You might be picturing a rather uncomfortable night, perhaps waking up with an imprint of a dragon motif on your cheek. But there were reasons, or at least strongly held beliefs, behind this practice. One of the primary theories is that hard pillows help to keep the head cool. Traditional Chinese medicine emphasizes balance, and an overheated head was thought to be detrimental to health and sleep. A cool slab of jade or a smooth, glazed ceramic pillow would naturally draw heat away from the head, promoting a sense of calm and clarity. Moreover, for the elaborately coiffed hairstyles of both noble men and women, constructions that could take hours to create, a hard, often slightly concave pillow help to preserve the hairdo overnight. Imagine going through all that effort with pins and ornaments, only to have it squashed flat by morning. It's a practical consideration we rarely think about. You wouldn't want to show up to an important court meeting looking like you wrestled a badger in your sleep. Some scholars also suggest that these hard pillows encourage sleeping on one's back or side, considered healthier sleeping postures. And of course, there's the element of status. A pillow made of precious jade, intricately carved and polished to a high sheen, was a clear symbol of wealth and refinement. Some porcelain pillows were even works of art in their own right, painted with delicate landscapes, poems, or scenes of daily life. They were heirlooms, passed down through generations. One particularly curious type of pillow was the opium pillow, typically made of porcelain or wood, which often had a small compartment. While the name is suggestive, historians note these compartments were more likely used for storing valuables or perhaps even fragrant herbs, rather than illicit substances, though the exact purpose of these compartments in all cases is still a matter of some discussion. Beneath you, the sleeping surface itself is a carefully constructed series of layers. Instead of a soft mattress, you might have a base of woven bamboo or rush mats. Bamboo is cool in summer, while rushes offer a slightly softer, more yielding surface. On top of this, layers of silk sheets, incredibly fine and smooth against the skin. And finally, quilts, filled with silk floss or fine cotton, often richly embroidered. The weight of these quilts would be comforting, a gentle pressure that encourages stillness and rest. The tactile experience is one of coolness, smoothness, and a surprising degree of support. It's a different kind of comfort than we're used to, less about sinking in and more about being held. As the evening deepens, your pre-sleep rituals begin. First, a bath. This is not a quick shower. It's a leisurely soak in a deep wooden tub, the water warmed and infused with herbs like mugwort for purification, or flowers like jasmine or osmanthus for their soothing scent. Attendants would gently ladle warm water over your shoulders. This ritual is about more than just cleanliness. It's about washing away the stresses of the day, both physical and mental. It's a moment of quiet contemplation, the steam rising around you, carrying the fragrant aroma of the herbs. You might even have special bath salts derived from mineral springs, known for their relaxing properties. One can only imagine the water bill, or rather the firewood bill for heating all that water. But for a noble, it's simply part of the expected standard of living. After your bath, you're dried with soft linen or cotton towels, and then you slip into your night attire. This would typically be loose-fitting robes made of the finest silk, perhaps unadorned for comfort or lightly embroidered. The feeling of clean skin against fresh, cool silk is in itself a luxurious sensation, a signal to your body that it's time to unwind. No constricting pajamas here, just flowing fabric that allows for ease of movement and keeps you cool. Before finally retiring to your magnificent bed, you might partake in a very light snack or a specific drink designed to promote sleep. This wouldn't be a heavy meal, as that was thought to disturb the digestive system and consequently your rest. Instead, perhaps a small bowl of warm congee, a thin rice porridge that's easy on the stomach, or more likely, a calming beverage. Warm milk, perhaps sweetened with a touch of honey, was known for its soothing properties. Even more common would be herbal teas. Chrysanthemum tea was, and still is, popular for its cooling and calming effects. Jujube tea, made from dried red dates, was believed to nourish the blood and calm the spirit. These drinks would be sipped slowly, savored not just for their taste, but for their intended medicinal benefits. It's a gentle way to prepare the internal environment of your body for the night ahead. You certainly wouldn't be chugging a large caffeinated beverage or scrolling through social media on a glowing rectangle. The ancient equivalent was probably just staring intensely at a particularly interesting spot on the wall until you got bored enough to sleep. The chamber is now perfectly prepared. The air is still, carrying only the faintest lingering scent of your herbal bath and the distant promise of incense. The light is minimal, just enough to see by, casting long, soft shadows. Your bed, with its cool, hard pillow and layers of smooth silk, awaits. It's an invitation, not just to sleep, but to enter a carefully constructed world of peace and tranquility. A testament to an ancient culture that valued the art of resting well, far beyond the simple utility of a silk pillow. You settle onto the mats, your head finding its place on the cool, unyielding surface of your chosen pillow. It's different, certainly, but you feel a sense of alignment, a quiet readiness for the night's embrace. The day is done. You lie there in the quiet opulence of your ancient Chinese bedchamber. The initial transition from the day's demands to the stillness of the night is complete. But what if sleep doesn't come easily? What if the mind, that restless monkey, refuses to settle? The ancient Chinese nobility had an array of remedies and rituals for this, approaches that targeted the mind, the body, and even the spirit. This wasn't just about fluffing a pillow, especially since your pillow is more akin to a beautifully crafted rock. It was about holistic harmony. First, let's consider the mind. If worries from court, family matters, or perhaps the lingering excitement of a poetry contest kept your thoughts racing, there were techniques to gently guide your mind towards tranquility. Meditation, in its early forms, influenced by Taoist practices of Zhuoang, sitting and forgetting, or emerging Buddhist traditions, was a known path to inner peace. You might not call it meditation in the way we do today, but the principle of focusing the breath, of observing thoughts without attachment, was understood. You might sit quietly on a cushion before even approaching your bed, focusing on the slow, rhythmic intake and exhalation of air. Imagine the quiet discipline, counting breaths, letting the day's anxieties drift away like leaves on a stream. It's a far cry from doom scrolling until your eyes burn, isn't it? Though perhaps the ancient equivalent was obsessively rereading the same philosophical scroll until the characters blurred into meaninglessness. Poetry itself was a tool. Reciting well-loved poems, especially those with themes of nature, solitude, or contemplation, could have a lulling effect. The cadence of the verses, the beauty of the imagery, these could gently steer the mind away from its preoccupations. Some nobles were poets themselves, and composing a few lines in their head, searching for the perfect word to capture a fleeting moonbeam or the scent of night-blooming jasmine, could be a meditative act, a creative release that eased the path to sleep. And then there was music. The gentle, ethereal tones of the guqin, a seven-stringed zither, were considered particularly conducive to calming the shen and preparing for sleep. A skilled musician, perhaps a trusted attendant or even a family member, might play soft melodies in an adjoining room, the notes drifting through the screens like a gentle breeze. This wasn't background noise, it was intentional sound therapy, the Huangdi Neijing, or Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, a foundational text of Chinese medicine compiled over centuries, discusses the therapeutic effects of the five musical tones on the internal organs and emotions. So your evening playlist was, in essence, a medical prescription. Historians have found detailed records of musical pieces specifically composed for relaxation and healing, a testament to the sophisticated understanding of music's power. It's like having a live acoustic ASMR session every night. Forget your Spotify sleep playlist. This is the original artisan experience. Incense played a crucial role too, going beyond just making the room smell pleasant. Specific types of incense, like sandalwood or agarwood, chenxiang, were prized for their ability to purify the air, calm the nerves, and even facilitate meditative states. You wouldn't just light a cheap stick from the corner store. The incense would be of the highest quality, perhaps sourced from distant lands via the Silk Road. It would be burned in an elaborate censer, or jianglu, often a beautiful bronze or ceramic work of art. The smoke would rise in thin, fragrant tendrils, perfuming the air with a scent that was both grounding and uplifting. Watching the smoke curl and dissipate could itself be a mesmerizing, calming activity. Some censers were even designed as miniature mountains or landscapes, so as the incense burned, the smoke would appear like mist clinging to the peaks, a tiny contemplative world on your side table. Of course, if you had a particularly stuffy nose, all this aromatic effort might be a bit lost on you, but the intention was certainly there. Now, if mental exercises and sensory soothers weren't quite enough, attention would turn to the body, specifically to internal remedies. Traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, viewed sleep as a state intrinsically linked to the balance of yin and yang and the smooth flow of qi and blood. Insomnia was often seen as a symptom of an imbalance, perhaps an excess of yang energy, making you too active or agitated, or a deficiency of yin or blood, failing to nourish the spirit and anchor it for the night. Herbal remedies were paramount. Your personal physician, a highly respected figure, would diagnose your specific imbalance and prescribe a custom formulated decoction or tea. These weren't just old wives' tales. They were based on centuries of empirical observation and detailed in extensive materia medica. For instance, Xuanzao Ren, sour jujube seed, was, and still is, a cornerstone herb for insomnia, believed to nourish the heart and liver blood, calm the spirit, and stop sweating. Bai Zi Ren, arborvitae seed, was another popular choice, used to nourish the heart and calm the shen, particularly for sleep, disturbed by palpitations or anxiety. Fu Ling, Poria mushroom, a type of fungus that grows on pine roots, was often included to calm the spirit and strengthen the spleen, aiding digestion and preventing the kind of internal turmoil that could disrupt sleep. Imagine your doctor prescribing you a specific type of mushroom to help you sleep. It sounds a bit like something out of a fantasy novel, but it was serious medicine. These herbs would be carefully prepared, often simmered for a long time, to extract their beneficial properties. The resultant brew might not always be delicious. TCM remedies are famously often bitter or have complex, earthy flavors, but you would drink it dutifully, trusting in its power to restore harmony. It's a bit like your modern green smoothie, that tastes like lawn clippings, but you drink it anyway because it's good for you. There was a deep-seated belief in the body's ability to heal itself if given the right natural support. Dietary advice also played a significant role. Heavy, greasy, or spicy foods were to be avoided in the evening, as they could lead to indigestion and restlessness. Instead, light, nourishing foods that supported yin were recommended. Think of simple vegetable broths, certain types of fish, or grains like millet. There was an understanding that what you ate directly impacted your sleep quality. No late night feasting on roasted meats, and strong wine if you were hoping for a peaceful slumber, unless your idea of peaceful slumber involved very vivid, meat-induced dreams. A rather peculiar, or at least less commonly discussed aspect of some traditional remedies involved the use of animal products, though often in very refined forms. For example, powdered pearl was sometimes used for its purported ability to calm the spirit and clear heat from the heart. Amber, a fossilized tree resin, was also occasionally used in formulas to tranquilize the mind. Historians still debate the efficacy and prevalence of some of the more exotic ingredients mentioned in older texts, trying to separate verifiable medical practice from folklore or purely symbolic uses. It's important to remember that for the nobility, access to rare and expensive ingredients was part of what distinguished their health care. Beyond ingestion, physical touch in the form of acupressure or self-massage was also employed. Simple techniques, like gently massaging specific points on the wrists, like Shenmin or Spirit Gate, temples or feet, could help to release tension and promote relaxation. While a full acupuncture session with needles would be performed by a physician, these simpler, non-invasive techniques could be easily taught and self-administered before bed. You might even have attendants trained in these gentle massage techniques, focusing on the head, neck, and shoulders to ease away the day's stresses. But what if the disturbances were not from within your own mind or body, but from the unseen world? The ancient Chinese held strong beliefs about the spirit world, and ensuring a harmonious relationship with it was crucial for peaceful sleep. Dreams were considered highly significant, often viewed as messages from ancestors or deities, or as journeys of the soul. A particularly unsettling dream could be a cause for concern, and steps might be taken to understand its meaning and appease any troubled spirits. You might consult a dream interpreter or a Taoist priest. Charms or talismans made from materials like peachwood, believed to have protective qualities, or jade, might be placed in the bedchamber or worn on the person. Sometimes specific calligraphy featuring auspicious characters or protective incantations would be hung on the walls or even sewn into the bedding. It's a bit like having a spiritual dream catcher, but with more elaborate philosophical underpinnings. Your servants played an indispensable, if often invisible, role in maintaining this sanctuary of sleep. They ensured the lamps were trimmed and filled, the incense was burning correctly, and that a calming tea was ready at the right moment. They would be responsible for fanning you gently on hot nights, using large, slow-moving fans made of silk or feathers, creating a soft breeze without being disruptive. Absolute silence and minimal disturbance were expected. Any servant caught making unnecessary noise near the master's chambers at night would face serious repercussions. They were the unseen guardians of your slumber, their meticulous work contributing to the overall atmosphere of peace. One can only imagine the pressure on them. Don't wake the noble, whatever you do. Their chi is delicately balanced. The very sounds of the night were also considered. Within your noble compound, efforts would be made to minimize jarring noises. However, the gentle sounds of nature, the chirping of crickets in the summer, the rustle of leaves in the courtyard garden, or the distant hoot of an owl, were often seen as part of the natural rhythm, a lullaby from the earth itself. Indoor water features, like small fountains in a nearby courtyard, could also provide a soothing, constant murmur. The aim was to create a soundscape that was natural and calming, rather than an artificial, dead silence, which could itself be unsettling. It's about finding that perfect balance, not too quiet, not too loud, just the gentle hum of a world at peace. The development of these elaborate sleep aids and rituals highlights a profound cultural emphasis on rest, not merely as a biological necessity, but as a cultivated art form essential for health, wisdom, and longevity. It wasn't about simply crashing after a busy day. It was a conscious, deliberate winding down, an engagement with practices designed to soothe every aspect of one's being. For the ancient Chinese noble, preparing for bed was preparing for a journey into the restorative depths of sleep, and perhaps even into the subtle realms of the spirit. And if all these measures failed, well, perhaps you just have to lie there on your porcelain pillow and contemplate the intricate patterns on your silk canopy until dawn, hoping tomorrow night's combination of herbs, incense, and good fortune would be more effective. Or maybe you just blame it on that one slightly too loud cricket outside your window. Crickets, always the scapegoats. The pursuit of perfect sleep was not merely a personal comfort. It was intertwined with broader philosophical and medical concepts. The Huangdi Neijing emphasizes that proper sleep allows the Hun, ethereal soul associated with the mind and consciousness, to return to the liver for rest and restoration, while the Pigo, corporeal soul, associated with bodily sensations and instincts, remains with the body. If the Hun could not rest, one would experience disturbed sleep, excessive dreaming, or an inability to fall asleep. Therefore, many remedies aimed at anchoring the Hun or calming the Shen spirit, which was thought to reside in the heart. Consider the meticulous attention paid to the timing of sleep. Ancient texts often advised aligning one's sleep schedule with the natural cycles of day and night, rising with the sun and retiring not too long after dusk. This adherence to the natural rhythm was believed to keep one's qi in harmony with the qi of the universe. For a noble, whose days might be filled with official duties or scholarly pursuits, this wasn't always easy, but the ideal was there. Burning the midnight oil, or rather the expensive lamp oil, was generally discouraged if one sought optimal health and longevity. Though one can imagine a young scholar cramming for the imperial examinations might have occasionally disregarded this advice, much to the chagrin of his physician. I told you, young Liu, no more late-night poetry slams if you want your qi to flow correctly. Let's delve a little deeper into the actual preparation of some of these sleep-inducing concoctions. It wasn't as simple as dunking a tea bag in hot water. The herbs themselves were carefully sourced, often from specific regions known for producing the highest quality specimens. They would be dried, sometimes processed in specific ways, like being stir-fried with honey or soaked in wine to enhance certain properties or reduce others. When preparing a decoction, the combination of herbs was crucial. A formula was like a carefully balanced team, with emperor herbs addressing the main complaint, minister herbs assisting the emperor, assistant herbs moderating harshness or treating secondary symptoms, and messenger herbs guiding the formula to the correct part of the body. You, as the noble, would likely not be doing the simmering yourself. A dedicated servant or a member of the household trained in basic herbal preparations would undertake this task, following the physician's precise instructions regarding the type of pot to use, usually earthenware, the amount of water, and the duration of cooking. The aroma of these simmering herbs would often fill a section of the household, a medicinal scent that was part of the daily sensory landscape. It's a far cry from popping a sleeping pill, a process that is quick, sterile, and largely devoid of ritual. Here, the very act of preparing the remedy was imbued with intention and care. What about non-herbal approaches for more persistent issues? If stress was a major factor, and whose life as a noble wasn't filled with some undercurrent of stress from political maneuvering or estate management, then practices like Qigong or Tai Chi Quan, Tai Chi, though more commonly associated with morning routines, had evening forms designed for calming and centering. These slow, deliberate movements, coordinated with deep breathing, were excellent for releasing physical tension and mental clutter. Imagine yourself in a moonlit courtyard, moving through the graceful postures of a Tai Chi form, the only sound the rustle of your silk robes and the chirping of crickets. It's a profoundly peaceful image and a powerful tool for preparing the body and mind for rest. Then there's the concept of pillow companions. No, not that kind. We're talking about small, often fragrant, sachets or charms that were tucked into or near the pillow. These might be filled with dried flowers like lavender, though lavender wasn't as prominent in ancient China as it was in Europe. Other calming botanicals like albizia flower or dried chrysanthemum petals were used, or specific herbs believed to ward off nightmares or promote peaceful dreams. Sometimes small pieces of jade carved into auspicious shapes, like a ruyi, a ceremonial scepter symbolizing good fortune, would be kept under the pillow. It was believed that the beneficial properties of these items would be absorbed by the sleeper throughout the night. One slightly unusual, though documented practice involved stone pillows that were not just solid blocks, but sometimes hollow and filled with dried herbs, so the sleeper would inhale the subtle fragrance as they slept. Talk about an immersive aromatherapy experience. The academic debate surrounding the true efficacy of many of these ancient remedies continues. While modern science has validated the calming properties of some herbs like sour jujube seed, the mechanisms of action for others, or for practices like placing jade amulets, are harder to quantify through a purely Western scientific lens. Was it the chemical compounds in the herbs, the psychological comfort of the ritual, the placebo effect of believing in a cure prescribed by a trusted physician, or a combination of all these factors? It's likely a complex interplay. For the ancient noble, the system worked within their worldview, a holistic approach where the physical, mental, and spiritual were inextricably linked. If a particular ritual or remedy brought peace of mind, then it effectively contributed to better sleep, regardless of the precise biochemical pathway. And let's not forget the power of suggestion. If your esteemed physician, after a lengthy consultation involving pulse taking and tongue examination, prescribed you a rare blend of mountain herbs gathered under a full moon, assuring you it would bring tranquil slumber, you were already halfway there. The authority and mystique surrounding these practices undoubtedly played a part. It's the ultimate bespoke wellness experience. You wouldn't just get a generic prescription, you'd get a personalized cosmic tune-up. One rather quirky detail found in some texts is the idea of listening to the water clock as a sleep aid. The steady, rhythmic drip of the water clock, marking the passage of time, was for some a meditative sound, much like a modern white noise machine that plays gentle rain sounds. For others, it might have been a source of anxiety, a reminder of the fleeting nature of time or of duties awaiting at dawn. So, like many things, its effectiveness was probably quite personal. Oh, is that the third drip of the second watch? Only 6 more hours of potential sleep. Fantastic. The environment outside the immediate bedchamber also mattered. Noble residences were often designed with inner courtyards and gardens. These weren't just for aesthetic pleasure during the day, they were integral to the nighttime atmosphere. The scent of night-blooming flowers like jasmine or tuberose, the rustling of bamboo leaves, the gentle gurgle of a small stream diverted through the garden. These natural elements were believed to have a profoundly calming effect. Your bedroom window, perhaps covered with translucent paper or silk rather than glass, would allow these subtle sensory inputs to filter through, connecting you to the natural world, even as you lay in your bed. It was an attempt to sleep with nature, rather than shutting it out completely. This intricate web of practices, from the grand principles of feng shui down to the specific herbs in your nightly tea, demonstrates a culture that took sleep very seriously. It wasn't a passive state of unconsciousness, but an active process of restoration and realignment, vital for maintaining health, clarity of mind, and a harmonious existence. Every detail was considered, every sense catered to, in the noble pursuit of a truly restful night, far beyond the simple promise of a silk pillow. You are nestled in your ancient Chinese bedchamber, surrounded by the carefully curated calm we've been exploring. The herbal tea has been drunk, the gentle music has faded, the last tendrils of incense have dissolved into the silken air. Now, you approach the threshold of sleep itself, a state understood not merely as a lack of wakefulness, but as a profound journey for the soul and a vital process for the body. The philosophy underpinning this reverence for sleep was deeply woven into the cultural and medical fabric of the time. As we touched upon, traditional Chinese thought posited that humans possess multiple aspects to their soul. The Hun, or ethereal soul, was considered the aspect associated with consciousness, dreams, and mental activity. During the day, it resided in the eyes, allowing for sight and perception. But at night, for true restorative sleep to occur, the Hun needed to return to the liver, where it would be anchored and nourished by the blood. If the liver blood was deficient, or if the Hun was agitated by unresolved emotions or excessive mental activity, it would wander, leading to disturbed sleep, vivid or unsettling dreams, or difficulty falling asleep in the first place. This concept of the Hun's nightly pilgrimage to the liver is a mainstream historical fact within the understanding of traditional Chinese medicine and its view of sleep. It's a beautifully poetic way of describing the mind's need to settle and find its safe harbor for the night. Imagine your little Hun packing its tiny ethereal bags each evening, ready for its commute to the liver. Don't forget your lunch, Hun. The Po, or corporeal soul, on the other hand, was more closely tied to the physical body, its sensations, and instincts. It was thought to remain with the body during sleep, overseeing basic physiological functions. A harmonious interplay between the Hun and Po, and between yin and yang energies, was the ideal for peaceful and rejuvenating slumber. Sleep was, therefore, a dynamic state of spiritual and energetic realignment, not just a passive power down. But what if, despite all the serene preparations, the calming teas, the fragrant incense, and the hard but supposedly healthy pillow, sleep remained elusive? What if persistent insomnia plagued you, the ancient noble? This wasn't uncommon. The pressures of court intrigue, the responsibilities of managing vast lands and a large household, or even personal anxieties, could certainly weigh heavily on the mind, making the Hun particularly restless. In such cases, more intensive measures might be employed. You would certainly consult your trusted physician again. They might prescribe stronger, more complex herbal formulas, perhaps involving rarer or more potent ingredients. These wouldn't be taken lightly, and their preparation would be even more meticulous. There were also specific acupuncture protocols aimed at more forcefully calming the spirit and anchoring the yang energy that might be flaring upwards and disturbing your peace. These treatments would be administered by the physician with great care. In some instances, if the insomnia was deemed to be caused by spiritual disturbances, perhaps a restless ancestor, a displeased local deity, or some malevolent influence, then rituals performed by Taoist priests or other spiritual specialists might be recommended. These could range from simple offerings and incantations to more elaborate ceremonies designed to pacify spirits, cleanse the environment of negative energies, or strengthen your protective ki. It's a reminder that in this worldview, the seen and unseen worlds were in constant interaction, and your well-being, including your sleep, depended on maintaining harmony with both. You wouldn't just get a sleeping pill. You might get a full spiritual diagnostic and a prescription for appeasing a grumpy earth spirit. Turns out, Lord Wang, the spirit of the West Wall is upset you haven't repainted. Try a nice calming ochre. One rather interesting and perhaps slightly weird detail is the existence of pillow books. And no, not always the erotic kind that often comes to mind, though those certainly existed and probably didn't do much for calming the Hun for sleep. Some pillow books were actually compilations of calming texts, poetry, or even simple soothing images. The idea was that you could peruse these gentle contents just before attempting to sleep, filling your mind with peaceful thoughts rather than anxieties. Some were even designed to be literally kept under or near the pillow. Historians still debate the full range and commonality of non-erotic pillow books as sleep aids, but textual references suggest they were a known, if perhaps niche, practice. It's the ancient equivalent of reading a particularly unexciting instruction manual to make yourself drowsy. Now, let's consider the ideal versus the reality. The texts and poetry of the time often paint idyllic pictures of the scholar official or the refined noble drifting off into a serene slumber, their dreams filled with cranes and misty mountains. And undoubtedly, with the resources at their disposal, many nobles did achieve a high degree of comfort and tranquility in their sleeping arrangements. However, it's also important to remember that they were human. They experienced stress, grief, illness, and excitement, just like anyone else. The pursuit of perfect sleep was an ongoing endeavor, not always a guaranteed outcome. Imagine a noble official who has just navigated a tense day at court. Perhaps there were veiled accusations, subtle power plays, or the weight of a difficult decision he had to make. He retires to his chamber, goes through all the calming rituals, drinks his herbal tea, yet his mind might still be replaying the day's events. The silk sheets might feel less comforting, the porcelain pillow a little harder than usual. The chirping of the crickets, normally a soothing sound, might suddenly seem irritatingly loud. This is the human element that often gets glossed over in idealized depictions. The sophisticated system of sleep hygiene was there to help, but it wasn't a magic bullet against the fundamental anxieties of life. There's an ongoing academic debate about how universally effective these elaborate remedies were, and to what extent the benefits were class-dependent or influenced by the significant placebo effect of such culturally endorsed practices. Did the peasant farmer, exhausted from a day of toil in the fields and sleeping on a simple mat with a straw-filled pillow, perhaps sleep more soundly than the noble with all his remedies, simply due to sheer physical exhaustion? It's impossible to say for certain. However, the very existence of this complex system of sleep aids for the elite suggests that insomnia and sleep disturbances were indeed significant concerns that they actively sought to manage. Perhaps wealth and status brought their own unique set of sleep-disrupting worries that a simpler life might not encounter. Oh dear, will my silk investments outperform Lord Chen's jade collection this fiscal year? So much to ponder. As the night wears on, assuming the remedies and rituals have worked their gentle magic, you drift into the deeper stages of sleep. Your breathing becomes slow and regular. Your body, supported by the layers of mats and the unyielding pillow, finds a comfortable stillness. The Hun is, ideally, resting peacefully in the liver, gathering strength for the coming day. The night passes in a series of sleep cycles, perhaps punctuated by dreams, some fleeting and forgotten, others perhaps more vivid, carrying symbolic messages that might be pondered upon waking. The hours before dawn are considered a particularly important time in TCM. This is when the QI of the lungs is most active and the body is preparing for the transition back to wakefulness. The air in your chamber is cool and still. The oil lamps have long since been extinguished or burn very low, attended to by a vigilant servant. The first, faint hints of dawn might begin to filter through the paper or silk coverings of your windows. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, you begin to stir. It's not a sudden awakening, but a gentle return to consciousness. You might become aware of the subtle sounds of the household beginning to wake, the distant crow of a rooster, the soft sweeping of a courtyard, the murmur of servants starting their daily tasks. These sounds are familiar, comforting, a signal that the protective bubble of night is giving way to the activities of the new day. You open your eyes. The light in the room is soft, a muted gray or perhaps tinged with the pale gold of early morning. You might lie still for a few moments, gathering your thoughts, perhaps recalling a fragment of a dream. How do you feel? Hopefully refreshed, your mind clear, your body rested. The lingering scent of last night's incense might still hang faintly in the air, a reminder of the rituals that guided you into slumber. Your first thoughts might turn to the day ahead, the duties to be performed, the people to meet, the ongoing tapestry of your noble life. The quality of your sleep, as understood by the wisdom of your time, will directly impact your energy, your mood, and your mental acuity throughout the day. A good night's sleep was an investment in a good day. An attendant enters silently, bringing warm water for washing and a fresh change of clothes. The transition from the world of sleep to the world of wakefulness is as gentle and deliberate as the preparation for bed. There is no jarring alarm clock, no rush to start the day. Instead, there is a mindful easing into activity, preserving the sense of calm cultivated during the night. The practices of ancient Chinese nobles for achieving restful sleep, from the precise alignment of their bedchambers to the specific herbs in their nightly infusions and the philosophical understanding of sleep's importance, paint a picture of a culture that deeply valued this fundamental human need. It was an art and a science, a blend of practicality, aesthetics, and spiritual belief, all aimed at ensuring that the hours of darkness were truly restorative, preparing one for the light of a new day. And while your porcelain pillow might not make it into modern bedding catalogs, the underlying principle of creating a dedicated sanctuary for sleep, free from the stresses of the waking world, is a timeless piece of wisdom. Perhaps we could all learn a thing or two from their dedication, even if we choose to keep our fluffy, non-medicinal pillows. Let's elaborate on the moments of waking and the subtle environment. The first conscious breaths of morning are often cool, carrying the freshest air of the day before the sun truly begins to warm the earth. You might take a moment to simply breathe, to feel the gentle expansion and contraction of your chest, a quiet acknowledgement of the life force, the key, within you. This isn't a rushed process. There's an appreciation for these liminal moments, the space between dreaming and full awareness. The quality of the morning light itself is significant. If your chamber is ideally situated, the early light would not be harsh or direct, but filtered, perhaps through trees in the courtyard garden or the translucent materials of your window coverings. This gentle awakening allows the eyes to adjust slowly, preventing the jarring shock of sudden brightness. The interplay of light and shadow within the room would be different from the deep shadows of night, now softer, more defined, revealing the textures of the silk hangings and the polished wood of the furniture in a new way. Consider the sounds again. The household is stirring, yes, but it's a controlled, respectful level of activity. Servants would move with practiced quietness, their footsteps muffled, their voices low if they needed to speak. The clatter of a busy kitchen would be kept distant, perhaps shielded by multiple courtyards or thick walls. The sounds you do hear are likely to be intentional. The gentle splash of water being poured into a basin for your morning ablutions, the soft rustle of garments as an attendant prepares your day robes. It's an environment designed to ease you into the day rather than thrusting you into it. One can only dream of such a considerate household, right? Instead of a leaf blower starting up at 7 a.m., you get the gentle sound of a broom sweeping fallen blossoms. Even the temperature of the room would be subtly managed. If it's a cool morning, a servant might have already discreetly added fresh, slow burning charcoal to a brazier, ensuring the room is pleasantly warm by the time you fully awake, but not stuffy. If it's a warmer season, the morning air itself, still cool from the night, would be allowed to circulate before the heat of the day sets in. The transition from your night robes to your day attire is another small ritual. The night robes, typically made of soft, flowing silk, are exchanged for the more structured, though still comfortable garments appropriate for your station and the day's activities. This change of clothing is symbolic, a shedding of the intimacy of the night and an assumption of your public or semi-public persona. Before any pressing matters of the day are brought to your attention, you might engage in a few moments of quiet contemplation or light stretching. Some nobles, particularly those influenced by Taoist longevity practices, might perform a series of simple Taoyin exercises, gentle stretches, and movements designed to awaken the body's energy channels and promote smooth qi flow after a night of stillness. Think of it as an ancient form of mindful morning yoga, done with grace and intention. A light morning meal would follow, again chosen to be easily digestible and to support the body's energy for the day. This might be a warm bowl of millet or rice congee, perhaps with some pickled vegetables or preserved fruits. Tea, of course, would be an essential part of the morning ritual, but perhaps a more invigorating blend than the calming teas of the evening. Green tea, known for its ability to sharpen the mind and refresh the senses, would be a common choice. The entire process, from the first stirrings of consciousness to being fully ready to engage with the day, is characterized by a sense of unhurried grace. This respect for the transition periods, from waking to sleeping, and from sleeping to waking, is a hallmark of a culture that understood the importance of rhythms and balance in maintaining well-being. The legacy of these ancient sleep practices is fascinating. While the specific materials and some of the more esoteric beliefs might seem distant to us now, the underlying principles, creating a calm environment, reducing mental stimulation before bed, using gentle natural aids, and valuing sleep as essential for health, are remarkably resonant with modern sleep science. The ancient Chinese nobles, with their porcelain pillows and herbal decoctions, were, in their own way, pioneers of sleep hygiene. They understood that a good day often begins with a good night, and they dedicated considerable effort and artistry to achieving just that. It makes you wonder if, amidst all our modern technology and pharmaceutical options, we've lost some of that intentionality, that almost sacred approach to the simple, vital act of sleeping. Perhaps there's wisdom to be found in imagining ourselves, just for a moment, drifting off in a silk-draped chamber, lulled by the scent of sandalwood and the promise of a peacefully resting Hun. Now for the relaxation section. The day, with all its ancient elegance and quiet concerns, fades like the last embers in a brazier. The heavy silk drapes of your imagined bedchamber grow softer, the intricate patterns blurring into gentle shadows. The cool, unyielding surface of the porcelain pillow beneath your head seems to meld into whatever supports you now, in your own time, in your own space. Let the echoes of the guqin's gentle melody quieten in your mind, replaced by the soft, rhythmic cadence of your own breathing. Feel the air enter, cool and cleansing, and feel it leave, warm and carrying away any lingering tension. Each breath is a soft wave, washing over you, drawing you further and further into a state of profound calm. The scent of sandalwood and jasmine from that distant time dissolves, leaving only the familiar, comforting aroma of your own peaceful surroundings. Allow your body to grow heavy, your muscles to release any tightness they might be holding. Your shoulders soften, your jaw unclenches, your brow becomes smooth and serene. There are no pressing duties of an ancient court awaiting you, no complex herbal decoctions to prepare or ponder. There is only this moment, this quiet space, this gentle descent into rest. The meticulous care of those ancient sleep rituals now transforms into your own effortless surrender to slumber. The world outside, with its hustle and its light, recedes, becoming a distant murmur, unimportant. You are cocooned in stillness, in safety, in the deep, deep quiet of the approaching night. Let go of all thought, all effort. Allow yourself to simply be, to drift, to float. Your mind, like the Hun returning to its peaceful abode, settles into a place of deep tranquility. You are supported, you are secure, you are ready for the restorative embrace of sleep. The journey of tonight is complete. Hey everyone, tonight we're slipping back in time, not to a battlefield or a king's court, but to something far more personal. We're heading to medieval Italy, specifically to explore the rather particular world of fashion police. Imagine, if you will, getting a stern talking to, or even a fine because your sleeves are deemed a touch too flamboyant, or the shade of your tunic is considered a bit too presumptuous for your station. It sounds almost comical, doesn't it? Like a scene from a historical satire. But for the people living in cities like Florence or Venice during the 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries, these rules were a very real, often very intrusive, part of daily life. You think choosing an outfit is tough now? Scrolling through endless online stores, wondering if that particular shade of neon green is too much for a Tuesday. Honestly, you probably wouldn't have survived this era with your wardrobe or your sanity intact. These weren't just gentle suggestions. They were laws, sumptuary laws, designed to dictate what you could and couldn't drape over your very own body. So before you get too comfortable, nestled in your presumably legally unrestricted pajamas, take a quick moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really does help the channel drift into the algorithms of like-minded sleepy people, and, as always, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your little corner of the world. It's always fascinating to see how far these whispers travel. Now dim those lights, turn on your fan for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. You find yourself walking not on smooth, even pavement, but on cobblestones, worn and uneven beneath your feet. The air is a tapestry of smells, baking bread from a nearby pasticceria, the slightly acrid scent of dying vats from the artisan quarter, a hint of wood smoke, and underlying it all, the general hum of a city packed with life. This is your world, a bustling Italian city-state in, let's say, the late 14th century. You're not a noble, not one of the grandi with their towering family homes and private chapels. You're, well, you're you, perhaps a skilled artisan, a shopkeeper, maybe a clerk working for a merchant house. You have a roof over your head, food on your table, and a keen awareness of your place in the intricate social dance of the city. And a significant part of that place, a very visible marker, is what you're wearing right now. Feel the fabric of your tunic. It's likely wool, perhaps a sturdy linen blend. It's not rough, not sackcloth by any means, but it doesn't have the liquid softness of the silks you see shimmering on the wives and daughters of the wealthy as they pass by in their litters, or the deep, plush velvet that adorns the city magistrates on feast days. Your clothes are functional, durable. The color is modest, maybe a muted brown, a decent gray, a faded green, or perhaps a serviceable blue, dyed with woad rather than the coveted, incredibly expensive indigo. Anything too bright, too ostentatious, well, that's just asking for trouble. You see, your city, like so many others across Italy, and indeed Europe, is governed by sumptuary laws. The word itself, sumptuary, comes from the Latin sumptuariae leges, relating to expense. These aren't new, not really. The Romans had them, trying to curb extravagance. But here in the burgeoning wealth of the Italian city-states, they've taken on a particular fervor. Officially, these laws are there for a few reasons. Firstly, to uphold the moral fabric of society. The church preaches against vanity and excess, and extravagant dress is seen as a clear sign of such sins. Lavish spending on clothes, it's argued, could lead to moral decay, distracting good Christian folk from more pious concerns. Secondly, and perhaps more pragmatically, these laws are about maintaining the social order, the clear visual distinctions between classes. If a baker's wife could dress like a banker's wife, how would anyone know who was who? It sounds a little silly to our modern ears, where individuality in dress is often celebrated, but back then, social hierarchy was the bedrock of society. Everyone had a place, and your clothes were a key part of signposting that place. It was believed that if the lower orders started dressing above their station, it could lead to social unrest, ambition, and a dangerous blurring of divinely ordained lines. You wouldn't want the popolo minuto, the little people, getting too many grand ideas, now would you? And thirdly, there's an economic angle. Many Italian cities, like Florence, were textile powerhouses. These laws could, in theory, protect local industries by, say, restricting the import or use of certain foreign fabrics by the general populace, reserving them for the elite or for export, thus managing the flow of wealth. Though historians still debate whether the primary driver for these laws was truly moral righteousness, economic protection for local textile industries, or the straightforward desire of the ruling class to keep everyone else firmly in their sartorial place. It's probably a tangled knot of all three, each strand pulling with different strength depending on the city and the specific decade. So what does this mean for you on an average Tuesday as you head to the market or to your workshop? It means you're constantly, perhaps subconsciously, aware of the sartorial line. Take your shoes, for instance. Those ridiculously long, pointed shoes called poulins or krakos that you might have seen on some daring young nobleman. Absolutely not for you. The length of the point was often legislated, with longer points permitted only for the higher ranks. If your shoes were too pointy, you could literally be committing an offense. It's almost comical, isn't it? Imagine a city guard, a bureau, pulling out a little ruler. Excuse me, Signorina, but that toe point appears to be half an inch over the legal limit for a woman of your estimated standing. We're going to have to issue a citation. One can only imagine the paperwork involved. Then there's the fabric itself. The amount of fabric used in a garment was a huge indicator of wealth. More fabric meant more expense, obviously, but it also meant a more flowing, impressive silhouette. So laws would often dictate the maximum length of a gown's train, or even the width of a sleeve. No elaborate trailing sleeves for you, dipping into your soup or getting caught in doorways. Practicality was, in a way, legislated for your class, and certain furs, forget about it. Ermine, with its pristine white and little black tails, was strictly for the highest nobility, often royalty. Fox, marten, perhaps some of the finer squirrel furs, were also restricted. You might be allowed rabbit, or perhaps the rougher, less luxurious sheepskin, but nothing that screamed, I am wealthier and more important than I look. The colors, too, were a minefield. Scarlet, a vibrant, expensive red dye made from Kermes insects, was a status symbol. Certain deep purples, historically associated with Roman emperors, were also off limits or severely restricted. You might see a wealthy merchant's wife in a beautiful crimson, a sign of her husband's success. But for you, it would be a flagrant violation. It's like a walking, talking color chart of social status. You just had to learn the rules, internalize them, know that the brilliant saffron yellow was likely beyond your reach, and that a particularly lustrous black, achieved through complex dyeing processes, was also a mark of quiet expense. And who enforced these sartorial edicts? It wasn't just a matter of social disapproval, though that certainly played a part. Cities appointed specific officials, sometimes called ufficiali della donne, officers of the women, as women's fashion was often a primary target, or similar titles. These weren't necessarily full-time fashion police, as we might imagine them, but magistrates and officials who had sumptuary enforcement as part of their duties. They could patrol the streets or act on information received. Yes, informers. Your neighbor, perhaps a little jealous of the new trim on your Sunday dress, could whisper a word in the right ear. Suddenly, you might find yourself facing an inquiry. The penalties varied. Often it was a fine, which could be substantial, especially if you were caught wearing something particularly egregious. The offending garment itself could be confiscated. Imagine saving up for months for a slightly better quality wool, or a small piece of silk to line your cuffs, only to have it snipped off or taken away entirely. Public shaming was also a possibility. Your name read out, your transgression described. It was all about making an example, discouraging others from getting too creative with their wardrobes. One of the truly odd details you might encounter in the statutes relates to buttons. Buttons, especially in large quantities or made of precious materials, could be a subtle sign of wealth. So some laws would actually specify the number of buttons allowed on a garment for different social classes, or restrict the materials they could be made from. You might be limited to 10 simple wooden or bone buttons on your bodice, while a noble lady could sport dozens of silver or even jeweled ones. It seems so incredibly finicky, doesn't it? Counting buttons. It's a long way from does this spark joy to does this comply with Municipal Statute 3, subsection B, regarding permissible fastening devices for persons of the artisan class. You walk past a church and notice a group of women emerging from Mass. Their gowns, for the most part, adhere to the expected norms. But then you see her, perhaps a young woman, recently married, her dowry perhaps a little more generous than her husband's actual standing. Her veil has a little too much lace, an intricate edging that catches the sunlight. Her sleeves, while not outrageously wide, have an extra fold, a subtle fullness that whispers of more fabric than strictly necessary. A few older women glance her way, their expressions unreadable. Is it admiration, envy, or a silent calculation of whether she's pushing the boundaries just a little too far? You yourself feel a little thrill, a vicarious enjoyment of her quiet rebellion. The desire to look good, to express oneself, to feel a little special, it's a deeply human trait, isn't it? And these laws, while ostensibly about order and morality, were constantly battling against that fundamental human desire. You might hear whispers of new edicts being debated in the town council. They're trying to limit the height of women's chopines now. Someone might mutter at the market stall, referring to those platform shoes that were becoming fashionable, partly to keep hems out of the muck, but also as a status symbol. The higher the platform, the more fabric needed for the dress to reach the ground, and the more assistance needed to walk. It's a fascinating example of how fashion can be both practical and wildly impractical at the same time. A mainstream historical fact to tuck away is that these sumptuary laws were not unique to Italy. They were a feature of urban life across much of medieval and Renaissance Europe, from England to France to the Holy Roman Empire. Each region had its own particular anxieties and its own specific prohibitions. You continue on your way, your own modest attire feeling perhaps a little dull, but also safe. You pass a cloth merchant's shop, the door open, and catch a glimpse of bolts of fabric in shades you can only dream of wearing. A deep, velvety blue, a shimmering gold brocade, a soft rose pink. For a moment, you imagine what it would be like to wear such things, to feel the weight and softness, to see the heads turn. But the thought is fleeting. The risk is too great, the social codes too deeply ingrained. Or are they? You've heard stories, of course, women who add forbidden trim to the inside of their gowns, where no one can see it, but they know it's there. Men who have a fine, prohibited silk doublet made, but only wear it for private gatherings within their own homes. Little rebellions, tiny assertions of self against the weight of societal expectation and legal restriction. As the sun begins to dip lower, casting long shadows across the piazza, you think about the day. You've earned your bread, you've navigated the social currents of the city, and you've done so while staying on the right side of the fashion laws, or at least you hope so. There's always that little flicker of anxiety. Was the buckle on your belt a little too shiny? Was the small piece of embroidery your sister added to your collar perhaps a bit too elaborate for someone of your means? It's a gentle, persistent pressure, this awareness of your clothing. Not a tyranny, perhaps, but a constant, subtle reminder of your place, a reminder woven into the very threads you wear. You might even find yourself idly wondering how many sumptuary officials are actually on duty tonight. It's a thought that's both amusing and a little unsettling. For a society so concerned with outward appearances, there sure were a lot of rules trying to keep those appearances in check. It makes you wonder if they were fighting a losing battle against human nature itself. The desire to adorn, to distinguish, to simply feel good in what you wear, that's a powerful current, hard to dam up completely with mere laws. You make a mental note to be a little extra careful with that new ribbon you bought for your hair. Best to save it for a very, very special occasion, or perhaps just wear it in the privacy of your own room. A tiny, unseen defiance. The city is quieting now, the daytime bustle giving way to the softer sounds of evening. Lanterns are being lit, casting a warm, flickering glow. You reach your own door, the familiar scent of home, a welcome comfort. As you prepare for the evening, shedding the clothes of the day, you can't help but feel a small sense of relief. Here, within your own walls, you are not being judged by the cut of your jib or the color of your kirtle, at least not by any city official. The cat, however, might have opinions. But cats, thankfully, are not empowered to issue fines for unseemly shades of gray. Or are they? That's a debate for another sleepy night. For now, it's the day and its sartorial scrutiny are done. You are simply you, in the quiet of your home, a citizen of a city that tries, with varying degrees of success, to legislate taste itself. One thing is certain, getting dressed in the morning was a far more complex affair than just picking what felt comfortable. It was an act of social navigation, a daily test of compliance, and for some, a subtle dance with defiance. And as you drift off, you might ponder how much, or how little, has truly changed. We still use clothing to signal who we are, or who we want to be, don't we? The labels may have changed. The fashion police may be more metaphorical now, but the language of clothes, that ancient dialogue of fabric and form, continues to speak. The days turn into weeks, and the rhythm of the city continues, a steady pulse of commerce, prayer, and social maneuvering. You've been diligent, keeping your attire well within the prescribed lines. That little ribbon you bought? It remains tucked away, a small, colorful secret, but the constant awareness, the subtle pressure of the sumptuary laws, it begins to wear a little thin, doesn't it? It's like a pebble in your shoe, a minor irritant that over time becomes surprisingly noticeable. You start noticing more, not just the grand displays of the nobility, but the smaller, perhaps more daring choices of people closer to your own station. A neighbor, Giovanni, a stonemason with a surprising flair for the dramatic, appears one Sunday with a new hat. It's nothing outrageous, just a felt cap, but the brim is a fraction wider than usual, and the feather tucked into its band is just a shade too long, a little too jauntily angled. He catches your eye and gives a tiny, almost imperceptible wink. A small act of defiance, perhaps, or maybe he just got a good deal on the feather and decided to risk it. It's infectious, this subtle pushing of boundaries. You find yourself lingering a little longer at the draper's stall, your fingers tracing the edge of a bolt of cloth that's a richer blue than you'd normally consider. It's not quite the forbidden indigo, but it's certainly a step up from your usual woad-dyed tunics. The merchant, a shrewd man named Lorenzo, with eyes that miss nothing, sees your interest. "A lovely shade, isn't it?" he murmurs, his voice low. Very popular with those who appreciate quality, and surprisingly discreet if worn with the right accessories. He means, of course, if you don't draw undue attention to yourself in other ways. It's a delicate dance of suggestion and plausible deniability. Let's say you have a cousin, Isabella. She's a spirited young woman, newly married to a clerk in the wool guild, a respectable match, but not one that elevates her significantly in the social strata. Isabella has always had an eye for style, a knack for making even the simplest garment look elegant. Lately, however, her creativity has taken a slightly more adventurous turn. She confides in you one afternoon, her voice a conspiratorial whisper as you share a cup of watered wine. Look, she says, lifting the hem of her overskirt just a fraction. Tucked away on the inside of the facing, where no one but she would know, is a narrow band of silk brocade, a tiny riot of color and texture. It was a scrap, she explains, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and nervousness. Too small for anything useful, too beautiful to waste. It's a secret indulgence, a rebellion of one. But it makes her stand a little taller, adds a spring to her step. You can't help but smile. It's harmless, really, isn't it? This is how it often begins, not with grand public acts of defiance, but with these small hidden deviations. Perhaps it's an extra inch on the length of a sleeve, quickly tucked or folded if an official looks too closely. Maybe it's a pair of shoes with slightly more pointed toes than permitted, kept for indoor wear or for quick dashes through less scrutinized alleyways. People develop an instinct for it, a sixth sense for when and where they can bend the rules. You learn which city gates are more laxly patrolled, which feast days might see the officials turning a more lenient eye, perhaps after a good meal and generous cup of wine themselves. The enforcement, when it comes, can be a bit arbitrary. Sometimes a stern warning is all it takes. An official might stop you in the street, his gaze lingering on a particular item of your clothing. He might ask you your name, your husband's or father's profession. The unspoken threat hangs heavy in the air. Often, this is enough to ensure compliance for weeks, even months. But sometimes, they decide to make an example. Fines are the most common punishment, and these fines could be hefty, a significant blow to a household budget. For repeat offenders, or for particularly flagrant violations, the penalties escalate. The offending garment is almost always confiscated. Imagine Isabella, her secret brocade discovered. Perhaps a rival, noticing her extra confidence, made an anonymous tip. The humiliation of having her skirt publicly inspected, the beautiful, illicit trim crudely cut away by a city guard. The shame would sting far more than the loss of the fabric itself. Public shaming was a powerful tool. Offenders might be paraded through the streets, wearing their illegal finery, perhaps with a sign detailing their transgression. Or their names and offenses could be read aloud in the main piazza after Sunday Mass. In a society where reputation is everything, this is a heavy price to pay for a bit of forbidden lace or an overly ostentatious belt buckle. And speaking of belt buckles, these small items, along with buttons, clasps, and other fasteners, were often a focus of intense scrutiny. Let's consider the belt. A simple leather strap was fine for most, but a belt with elaborate silverwork, or one made of woven silk with gold threads, that was a clear statement of wealth. Laws would meticulously detail the permissible materials and decorations for belts based on social rank. You might see a wealthy merchant sporting a belt with a handsomely worked silver buckle, a testament to his success. But if a craftsman were to wear something similar, it would be seen as an affront, an attempt to usurp a status not his own. It's fascinating how much significance could be packed into such a small accessory, and people, being endlessly inventive, were constantly finding ways to tiptoe around the regulations. One common trick was to have detachable embellishments. Sleeves, for example, were often made separately and then tied or sewn onto a bodice. This made it easy to have a pair of rather plain, everyday sleeves for public view, and a more elaborate, perhaps even illegal pair for private occasions or for a quick, daring display. A woman might have a gown with loops or hidden buttons, allowing her to attach a forbidden train or an overly luxurious collar for a wedding feast, only to remove it quickly before heading home. It was a game of sartorial cat and mouse. You might even hear whispers of a clandestine underground market for these fashionable yet forbidden trimmings. Not a real marketplace, of course, but a network of discreet seamstresses and merchants willing to procure or create items that bent or outright broke the sumptuary codes for a price. Need a bit of ermine for just the tiniest collar, Senora? For purely medicinal warmth, of course. The winks would be practically audible. The wealthy and the nobility were not entirely exempt from these laws, though the rules for them were different and often more about maintaining distinctions within the upper echelons or preventing them from looking like royalty if they weren't. Nobles might be restricted in the amount of gold thread they could use, or the specific types of jewels they could display, to prevent them from outshining, say, a visiting dignitary, or even the ruling family of the city-state. Sometimes, laws aimed at nobles were to curb their own ruinous extravagance, as competitive displays of wealth could bankrupt even powerful families. But mostly, the sumptuary laws served to keep the lower and middling sorts visibly distinct from them. And you can imagine the frustration of a newly wealthy merchant family, rich enough to afford the finest silks and furs, but legally barred from displaying their wealth in the same manner as an ancient, perhaps less financially solvent, noble family. This tension, this desire to translate wealth into visible status, was a constant engine for attempts to circumvent the rules. You witness an incident one market day. A woman, the wife of a prosperous butcher, a man doing well, but still firmly in the tradesman class, is wearing a new hat. It's a rather tall, conical affair, a hennin, a style that was becoming popular but was generally associated with noblewomen. This particular hennin is not overly bedecked with jewels, but its height alone is audacious. Two city guards, looking rather bored, suddenly perk up. They approach her, their expressions stern. A small crowd gathers, a ripple of nervous anticipation. You feel a knot of anxiety in your own stomach, even though you've done nothing wrong. The guards question her, their voices low but firm. The woman tries to argue, her face flushed. She claims it was a gift, that she didn't realize it was inappropriate. The guards are unmoved. One of them produces a small, official-looking booklet and consults it, running his finger down a page. The murmur of the crowd grows softer, everyone straining to hear. Finally, one guard announces that the hat is indeed in violation of City Ordinance Number 27, regarding headwear for women of the Butchers Guild status. The hat is unceremoniously removed from her head. She is issued a fine, a sum that makes her gasp. Tears well in her eyes as she accepts the slip of paper. The confiscated hat is held aloft for a moment by one of the guards, a warning to all onlookers, before it's bundled away. The crowd disperses, a little more subdued, a little more aware of the ever watchful eyes of the law. It's moments like these that reinforce the rules, the public nature of the enforcement, the clear consequence. It all serves to remind people of the boundaries. Yet it's a mainstream historical fact that these sumptuary laws were constantly being reissued, revised, and updated, sometimes every few years. This very frequency suggests they were often ignored, circumvented, or simply became outdated as fashions evolved. If a law has to be restated repeatedly, it's a good sign it's not being terribly effective. The authorities would lament the insatiable desire for novelty or the arrogance of the lower orders in dressing beyond their station. One of the truly odd details you might come across in some city statutes is the specific prohibition against certain types of footwear for women that made them walk with a lascivious gait. It's not just about the expense or the materials, but the perceived moral impact of the fashion itself. Imagine a magistrate trying to define, in legal terms, a lascivious gait, and then trying to prove that a particular pair of shoes directly caused it. The mind boggles at the courtroom dramas that might have ensued. Exhibit A, Your Honor, these pattens, which when worn by the defendant, caused her to sway in a manner most unbecoming and likely to incite, well, you know. Scholars continue to discuss the extent to which sumptuary laws actually succeeded in curbing extravagant display versus simply driving it underground or into new, unregulated forms of expression. Did these laws genuinely preserve social distinctions and public morality, or did they merely create a culture of cunning concealment and symbolic transgression, forcing people to find more subtle, or perhaps more clever, ways to express their status and individuality? It's likely a bit of both. For every person cowed into compliance, there was another figuring out how to sew pearls onto the lining of their sleeves. You hear of a case that causes a stir throughout your quarter. A young tailor, known for his skill and his rather daring designs, is accused of consistently providing his clients, many of them from the merchant class aspiring to look more noble, with garments that cleverly subverted the sumptuary laws. He wasn't making overtly illegal clothes, not usually. Instead, he was a master of loopholes. He'd use a fabric that was technically permissible, but dye it in a way that mimicked a more expensive material. He'd add pleats and folds that gave the impression of much more fabric than was actually used. His buttonholes might be a little too ornate, as his collars cut just a fraction higher than was strictly proper for that client's rank. For a long time, he got away with it. His clients delighted with their fashionable, yet deniable attire. But then, perhaps a jealous rival or an overzealous official decides to make an example of him. His workshop is raided, bolts of cloth are scrutinized, patterns are measured, account books are seized. The charge isn't just that he broke the law, but that he facilitated and encouraged others to do so. This is more serious. This is not just personal vanity. This is a systematic undermining of the social order through textiles. The tailor is arrested. His trial becomes a local spectacle. Witnesses are called, nervous clients who suddenly can't recall commissioning anything even remotely questionable. Other tailors are brought in as expert witnesses to testify on the subtle illegalities of his techniques. The prosecution paints him as a dangerous influence, a man who, stitch by stitch, was unpicking the very fabric of society. You feel a certain sympathy for the tailor. He was just trying to make a living, to use his skills, to give people what they wanted. But in a world where clothing is so heavily policed, even a needle and thread can become weapons of social disruption. The anxiety of an inspection is a palpable thing. Imagine you are wearing your cousin Isabella's hand me down gown, one she assures you is perfectly legal, but you have a nagging doubt about the trim around the neckline. Is it too wide? You see an official, known for his strictness, eyeing people further down the street. Your heart does a little flutter kick. You subtly try to adjust your scarf to cover the questionable trim. You avoid eye contact. You find yourself mentally rehearsing your father's profession and your family's good standing just in case. The relief when he passes by without a second glance is immense, leaving you feeling a little shaky. It's this constant, low-level stress, this need to be perpetually aware of how you present yourself to the world, that is one of the most pervasive effects of these laws. It's not just about the big, dramatic confrontations. It's about the everyday vigilance. As the years pass, you see fashions change, sometimes subtly, sometimes more dramatically. New styles emerge, often from the courts of France or Burgundy, and they trickle down, adapted and modified, challenging the existing sumptuary codes. The authorities are always a step behind, trying to legislate last year's fads, while new ones are already taking root. It's an endless game. And through it all, that human desire to adorn, to express, to stand out, or sometimes just to fit in with a slightly more fashionable crowd, continues to bubble beneath the surface, a resilient and irrepressible force. You even hear a joke going around the market. Why did the city councilman bring a ladder to the silk merchants? He heard the prices were high, but the morals were low, and the necklines even lower. It's told in hushed tones, followed by a nervous laugh, but it captures the sentiment perfectly. The regulations are there, but life and fashion always find a way. The next challenge is always just around the corner. A new sleeve style, a different hat shape, a more daring color, all waiting to test the limits of what the law and society will tolerate. And you, like everyone else, are watching, waiting, and perhaps, just perhaps, planning your own tiny, stylish rebellion. The trial of the young tailor, Niccolo, casts a bit of a shadow over your quarter. It drags on for what feels like an eternity, though it's probably only a matter of weeks. Word of the proceedings filters out through those who manage to squeeze into the public gallery, or from clerks who can't resist sharing a juicy tidbit. The prosecution is relentless, portraying Niccolo not just as a lawbreaker, but as a corrupter of public order, a man who profited from vanity and encouraged social climbing. His defense, that he was merely a craftsman serving his client's desires within the bounds of good taste, sounds increasingly flimsy against the stern pronouncements of the city's legal minds, who seem to equate good taste with knowing your place. Finally, the day of judgment arrives. There's a heavy, expectant atmosphere in the city. You find yourself, along with many others from your neighborhood, drawn towards the main piazza, where sentences are often publicly announced and sometimes carried out. You don't necessarily want to see what's coming, but there's a morbid curiosity, a need to witness the outcome of this drama that has touched so many lives, even indirectly. The mood is somber. When the verdict is read, a collective gasp ripples through the crowd. Niccolo is found guilty, guilty of persistently and knowingly violating the sumptuary laws, and, more damningly, of encouraging and enabling others to do so. The sentence is harsh, designed to send a clear message. He is to pay an enormous fine, one that will surely bankrupt him and his family. His workshop, his tools, his precious bolts of cloth, all are to be confiscated by the city. And then comes the part that makes your stomach clench. He is to be publicly shamed, not just by parading him through the streets, but by having some of his most offensive creations burned before him. Finally, he is to be banished from the city for a period of 5 years. Banishment. It's a civic death. To be cast out from your home, your community, your livelihood. You watch from a distance as the sentence is partially enacted. A pyre has been built in the center of the piazza. Guards bring forth bundles of confiscated garments, a vibrant sleeve, an overly ornate doublet, a gown with suspiciously luxurious lining. These are not just clothes, they are symbols of defiance, of dreams of aspiration, now reduced to fuel for a warning fire. The sight of the confiscated finery, beautiful even in its disgrace, being consumed by flames is strangely poignant. Niccolo himself, pale and defeated, is made to watch. There's a grim satisfaction on the faces of some officials, but many in the crowd are silent, their expressions a mixture of pity and fear. This is what happens when you push too hard, when the subtle dance with defiance becomes an open challenge. The crackdown doesn't end with Niccolo. For a while, there's a renewed strictness in the enforcement of the sumptuary laws. Officials are more vigilant, fines are levied more readily. People retreat into sartorial caution. That richer blue fabric you were admiring? It stays on the bolt at Lorenzo's shop. Your cousin Isabella carefully unpicks the secret silk brocade from her underskirt, her small act of rebellion no longer feeling quite so harmless. The city feels a little duller, the vibrant streetscape muted by a wave of enforced modesty. It makes you think about the broader impact of these laws. They weren't just about individual choices. They shaped the very fabric of society and the economy. Local textile industries, for example, were often protected by laws restricting imported fabrics. This could be good for local weavers and dyers, ensuring a market for their goods. But it could also stifle innovation, limiting the variety of materials available and keeping prices high for certain legally sanctioned luxuries. The laws certainly reinforced the social hierarchy, making it harder for the nouveau riche, the successful merchants and bankers, to visually display their newfound wealth and challenge the supremacy of the old noble families. Individuality, as we understand it, was not a prized commodity. Conformity to your station, in dress as in all things, was the ideal. These laws were a constant reminder that you were part of a collective, your identity largely defined by your birth and profession, not by your personal taste in hats. And it wasn't just clothing. It's a key historical fact that sumptuary laws often extended to many other areas of life where conspicuous consumption might occur. The number of guests you could invite to a wedding, the types of food you could serve at a banquet, the amount you could spend on funeral arrangements, even the gifts exchanged at baptisms, all could be subject to legal limits. The idea was to regulate every aspect of outward display, to ensure that no one, at any level of society, stepped too far out of their prescribed economic and social lane. Imagine having a city official scrutinize your wedding menu. So, roasted peacock for the main course? For a cooper's daughter? I think not. May I suggest a nice capon, and perhaps limit the almond pastries to two per guest? It sounds utterly exhausting. You even hear an amusing, if perhaps apocryphal, story about a minor city official who was known for his zeal in enforcing the rules against excessively long sleeves. One day, he was seen at a public festival, his own wife sporting sleeves that were, shall we say, generously proportioned, brushing against the cakes on the refreshment table. When a wry comment was made by a bystander, the official supposedly huffed that his wife's sleeves were of a medically necessary length to protect her delicate wrists from the evening chill. The hypocrisy wasn't lost on anyone. It's an odd detail, perhaps, but it highlights how these laws could be selectively applied, or how easily those in power could find justifications for their own indulgences. But slowly, subtly, things begin to shift. The intense period of crackdown following Nicolo's trial eventually eases. Human nature, with its inherent desire for self-expression and a bit of novelty, begins to reassert itself. New styles continue to arrive from other parts of Italy or from across the Alps. The authorities can't keep up. The sheer difficulty of enforcing these laws in a bustling, growing city becomes increasingly apparent. How many officials would it take to measure every sleeve, inspect every hat band, count every button? It's an administrative nightmare. Moreover, the economic landscape is changing. The old feudal orders are slowly giving way to a more dynamic, commerce-driven society. Wealth is becoming more fluid. A successful merchant might, in terms of actual disposable income, be far richer than a land-poor nobleman. This burgeoning capitalist spirit chafes against the rigid sartorial restrictions. If you've earned your florins, why shouldn't you be able to spend them on a fine velvet cloak, regardless of your grandfather's profession? The debate continues among academics regarding whether the decline of sumptuary laws was a cause or a symptom of broader shifts towards a more modern capitalist society. Did the laws fade because society was already changing, making them irrelevant? Or did their fading allow for greater social mobility and new forms of economic expression? It's likely a complex interplay, a slow unraveling of old certainties. You start to see it on the streets. The changes are gradual. Perhaps a merchant's wife wears a necklace with a few more pearls than would have been tolerated a decade ago. Maybe a young artisan sports a hat with a slightly more flamboyant plume, and no one bats an eye. The laws are still on the books, most of them, but they are enforced with less rigor, or only in the most extreme cases. There's a sense that the city council has bigger fish to fry: trade disputes, political alliances, the ever-present threat of plague or famine. Policing hemlines starts to seem a little less urgent. It's a bit like watching ice melt. You don't see it happen moment by moment, but one day you realize the landscape has fundamentally changed. The sharp edges of the sumptuary code are becoming blurred. New ways of displaying status are emerging too. Perhaps the size and grandeur of one's home, the education of one's children, the patronage of artists. Clothing is still important, of course. It always will be. But it's no longer the sole, or even primary, legally enforced badge of rank. You find yourself reflecting on this human need to communicate through what we wear. Even now, in your own time, without the threat of fines or confiscation for choosing the wrong color, you still make choices. You dress one way for work, another for a celebration, another for a quiet evening at home. Your clothes speak a language, sending signals about who you are, or who you want to be, or what group you belong to. The stakes are different, certainly. You're unlikely to be banished for wearing ripped jeans to a formal event, though you might get some disapproving looks. But the underlying impulse, that desire to use appearance as a form of expression and social navigation that feels timeless. It makes you chuckle to think what those medieval magistrates would make of today's fast fashion, the sheer volume and variety of clothing, the trends that change with bewildering speed. A society where a shop assistant might wear a convincing imitation of a duchess's designer gown, all for the price of a few days' wages. It would have probably caused them to spontaneously combust from sheer regulatory apoplexy. So much fabric, so many colors, and no discernible class distinctions whatsoever. It's anarchy, I tell you, anarchy by H&M. As the 15th century progresses, you can feel the stirrings of something new in the air, what future generations will call the Renaissance. There's a burgeoning interest in classical forms, a celebration of human achievement, a greater emphasis on individual expression, in art, in thought, and yes, eventually in dress. The old, rigid hierarchies are not gone, not by a long shot, but they are being subtly reshaped, made more permeable. Sumptuary laws don't vanish overnight. They linger, some of them, for centuries more, popping up here and there, usually in times of social anxiety or economic stress. But their heyday, their most intrusive and pervasive period, is slowly drawing to a close in many of these vibrant Italian city-states. You see an elderly woman now, someone who would have lived through the strictest periods of enforcement. She's dressed neatly, respectfully, but there's a richness to the dark wool of her gown, a subtle sheen that speaks of quality, that might have raised an eyebrow or two in her youth if she wasn't of a certain standing. Her granddaughter walks beside her, wearing a dress in a cheerful light green, her hair loosely braided with ribbons, unconcerned by the thought of an official measuring their length. There's a quiet evolution in their contrasting appearances, a story of changing times and loosening constraints. The tale of the fashion police, of these sumptuary laws, is a fascinating glimpse into a world where what you wore was not just a matter of personal choice, but a matter of public order, morality, and law. It was a world of meticulous rules and creative rebellions, of social anxieties played out in silk and wool. And as you walk these imaginary cobblestone streets one last time, the setting sun casting long, mellow shadows, you carry with you the scent of wood smoke and distant spices, the murmur of the crowd, the feel of rough-spun wool, and the imagined caress of forbidden silk. The rules were many, and the urge to look your best, to express just a little bit of who you were, was a powerful, enduring human story, woven into the very fabric of life. Now, as the last light fades from our medieval Italian city,